And now, without any further delay, let's begin today's event. Once again, MPIs are dead. Will they be reborn in the cloud? Sponsored by Verado and hosted by Health Data Management. I would like to introduce your moderator for today, and that is Jim Erickson. Jim, you now have the floor.
Great. Thank you so much. And hello, everybody. Welcome to our session today on MPIs. Looking forward to this. We're going to have maybe a little gentle Halloween theme rebounding through it. So coming back to haunt you, MPIs. My name is Jim Erickson, and I will be your moderator today. I'm a longtime editorial director at Information Management Magazine, do a lot of work with our friends at Health Data Management, and now I work mostly as a research analyst doing consulting and doing some market research into areas including things like MPIs. So you're going to be hearing from a couple speakers today on this topic, coming back to haunt you, why MPIs are dead and what killed them. That leaves an unanswered question, and I think that'll be addressed today. You're going to be hearing from a couple good qualified folks with feet on the ground. Joaquim Neto, Vice President of Healthcare at Verado, and certainly well experienced in the MPI field and the HIE field, consulting and delivering solutions with a lot of organizations out there. So he'll be talking about MPIs, but you're also going to be getting some more boots on the ground information today from, looks like I'm trying to move ahead here. Okay, one more. There we go. From Hinata Garvin, who's a Director of Technology at Rio Grande Valley Health Information Exchange, someone who has been building and implementing systems, and he's going to talk about RGV's experience and what they're doing in the area of MPIs and elsewhere. I'm going to return in the middle for a quick polling question. We only have one for you today, if we can help us with that. And again, at the end, for some Q&A, we'll reserve a little bit of time. So I encourage you, as I will be taking notes here, if you think up any questions, we'll try to get to what we can at the end. Anything we don't get to, we'll be sure to follow up. And as Christina said, we will send you a link to this presentation replay, and you can download the slides from the resource folder at the bottom of your screen. So with that, let's get going. I'm going to hand things off to Joaquim Neto, who's going to talk about why MPIs are dead and what killed them, and why they'll be reborn in the cloud. So Joaquim, why don't you get us going? Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jim. So happy Halloween, everyone. Thanks for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us for this discussion. Just jumping right in here, I'll let you know what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give just a tiny background on Verado very briefly to set some context, and then we'll get into the Halloween topic, why we're saying that conventional MPIs are dead. So what we mean by that. We say that conventional MPIs are dead, but everyone knows they're still around. So they must be zombies of some kind because they continue to be used everywhere. So we're going to talk a little bit about how people are using their MPIs today, even if they're not totally getting the job done. Specifically, we want to talk about total cost of ownership, kind of big focus of the information we want to convey today. Sort of simplicity of the cloud and how the cloud can help solve this problem, how we're using it to help solve this problem. And then we'll get to a real-world use case. So Hinata Garvin from Rio Grande Valley HIE, like Jim said, is here today. We'll get to him. It's not 1/7 of the presentation. Hinata is really the star of the show today. So I'll get through our background and get things over to Hinata here pretty quickly. And then at the end, we'll certainly have time for some questions, I think. So brief background on Verado. We're a startup based out of D.C., or just outside of D.C. in McLean, Virginia. We've been around since 2012 in the identity management space, identity resolution space. We do some work in a variety of industries, but our dominant focus is in healthcare. So our clients range from HIEs like Rio Grande to providers, payers. We work with other parts of the healthcare ecosystem as well. We do some government healthcare work. And just at the beginning of this year, we launched our MPI offering, what we call a universal MPI. And so that will sort of serve as a backdrop for the discussion today. So this solution that we provide, what we call universal MPI, it serves the same needs that you all are familiar with, that master patient index technology addresses. which namely is linking records from multiple different systems, EHRs, member management systems, and so forth, to create a complete view of your patient records. And that supports a whole variety of use cases. The one unique thing about our approach is that we have that offering, which is basically a pure MPI offering, but then we also have ways to deploy our technology alongside existing MPIs. And so that's one of the things that we'll touch on briefly today as well. So conventional MPIs are dead. Let's talk about that. We'll explain what we mean by that. And in fact, before we get into that, we do want to do one thing. There's actually great attendance today, just looking at the attendee list from people from a wide variety of different types of organizations. And one of the things that we see when we're talking to clients is that people have been trying to solve this patient matching record reconciliation issue for a long time, and everyone's still trying to solve it. And it seems that now it's as important as ever. So kind of no matter what part of the organization you're in, there are strategic initiatives that depend on getting accurate, timely resolution to who owns individual records that are in your critical healthcare systems. So whether you're sort of executive branch, looking at the big picture and managing costs of an organization, or you're involved in the some of the M&A activity that's going today. There's tons of consolidation, obviously, in the industry, whether you're talking about providers coming together or providers and payers coming together, developing closer relationships as part of ACOs. All of this sort of organizational activity places a huge burden on resolving more and more data, getting that complete patient view across different settings. Obviously, the clinical aspects, so if you're trying to reconcile data from multiple systems to get that true, complete view of a patient in front of your physicians, or feed consolidated clinical information into analytics processes to discover new ways to treat people or discover risky populations. Another classic example is something that depends on accurately resolving all of these records you have for your patients. Or if you're more on the operational side, in the HIM department, for example, and are charged with simply the mechanics of making sure that you have high-quality data, and you're looking at the number of people that you need to manage these data and maintain accurate results. Regardless of where you sit in there, hopefully one of those reasons why you recognize the importance of patient identity and are here today. So we thought we'd just do a quick poll, and Jim, maybe I'll hand that off to you, and just see for the folks that are on the call today, which of these initiatives or these drivers that are listed here are the ones that are most relevant to you. And we'll just take a minute and you can see, in addition to yourselves, what other folks on the webinar today are concerned most about.
Great. Thanks, Joaquin. And yeah, we do have a whole variety of kinds of institutions today, so it'll help us to understand a little bit about your initiative. So if you could select from this list multiple, I believe we can take multiple answers also. Which critical strategic initiatives are top of mind for you that rely on accurate patient matching? So we have things like patient experience, population health, reduced cost, M&A, longitudinal patient record, clinical quality analytics, and on and on and on. If you could select the ones here from this list, and don't forget to hit that submit button when you're done. I'll close it and just give you a little time to answer these. So select as many as you want and hit the submit button. I want to remind you again that I'm taking some notes. I hope you'll have some questions. Hinata is going to speak a little later on about the experience at Rio Grande Valley Health Information Exchange, and we will love to have some questions from you to ask him as well. So I'm going to give it just another second. Don't forget to hit the submit button. And, okay, I'm going to close this poll here. And here we go. Okay, Joaquin, well, looks like we got a lot here. What are you seeing in these results? Patient experience, longitudinal patient record, reduced manual effort, HIPAA security. Looks like a range of needs.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. And we've done this once or twice before. It's always interesting to see how this is going to come out. I think it's sort of similar to last time in that there's quite a number of categories that sort of have really rank high on people's, on people's list. But at the same time, you can't narrow it into just one or two categories. So I think this, wide distribution of items that are important to different people that are on the call today shows how widespread, the patient identity problem is. It touches many different parts of the organization, and it really is a shared problem that folks across the organization need to work with.
Right. So we have automation here, but as well as things like compliance and security, which is something I know you folks work a lot on, customer satisfaction, and then the usual population health and so forth. So it's a lot to cover. Yeah, it's a wide range. And so I think, Jim, these poll results, will these be a part of the package that we're able to send out to folks afterwards? I will check to be sure of that when we do send it along. So why don't you carry on with the presentation? Great. Sounds good. Okay, so with that backdrop establishing the importance of patient identity, which is probably taken for granted for everyone that's here today. Why is it more important? So, one of the reasons is that over the last few years, there's just an increasingly large amount of data that's available associated with your patients and your members that can be used to improve care, improve quality, improve costs across the board. So as more and more data becomes available, it's just putting a higher and higher burden on this integration problem. So both from a kind of mechanics integration, piping the stuff together, but then taking all this data and reconciling it into that single patient view. So whereas, 15 or 20 years ago, you had a couple of EHRs that you were trying to connect, it was sort of a smaller targeted problem. Today, there's just so many new innovative applications that are either collecting data about patients or applications and analytics that are able to use the data that you have and draw insights from them. All of that is increasing that importance of resolving your patient identity. So they're just more drivers than ever before, really. But the problems related to matching patient records haven't changed. There's still this limiting factor of data quality, and this is something that virtually all the clients we speak with are in agreement on. Is that no matter how much effort you put into today trying to resolve your patient identity across your systems, you may have invested in sort of very advanced technology, you may have invested in lots of person resources, and no matter what, you've come to the conclusion that there's only so far you can go with the data that's available. There have been a number of initiatives and some studies done recently over the last couple of years on, if you do a better job of collecting demographic information during the registration process, how much that will make it easier and better for you to get record resolution on the back end. And that's great. That's definitely something that lots of organizations are focused on and will definitely yield results over time. But it's not a panacea. It will take a long time to improve data quality, and it's something that people have been trying to do for a long time. So this still is one of these limiting factors, the types of data issues that are present in EHRs and are probably going to be present for quite some time. And that's even if you don't have pumpkin-headed people in your EHRs, just noticing this graphic for the first time. So you have this data quality problem underlying things. And then contrast that with sort of the state of the MPI technology today. So most of the MPIs that are in place today, the traditional on-premise software packages that folks are using, all stem from some solutions that were built in the 90s, really. And there was a handful of sort of MPI approaches that came out then that have been built on and become software packages. And if you look at that, there's sort of a couple different approaches, some deterministic approaches, some probabilistic algorithms that are all founded in various matching theories. And those were created, like I said, sort of in the 90s, and then were incrementally improved for 10 or 15 years. But they basically reached this point of diminishing returns.
That technology approach is gone as far as it can go, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually very good, and it's allowed us, across the industry to do, make leaps and bounds in being able to connect records across different systems despite some of those data quality issues. But the idea is that we've sort of hit the limit, and unless we really start addressing that data part of the problem, there's only going to be so far we can go. Okay, so the overall summary, why we say the MPIs are dead. Patient matching is more critical than ever. We recognize that it's more difficult than we thought it would be, which again is based largely on the data. And then with the existing approaches, we've gone as far as we can go. So the zombie MPI. These MPIs that are out there today, that again, they're delivering value. We don't want to take anything away from that, but they're not fulfilling the promise, and so they're causing a lot of work and not yielding the results that the industry is demanding, really. So the things that organizations find themselves focused on when using the traditional approach is that you get into these sort of never-ending tuning cycles. So again, the underlying data is insufficient to be able to easily match these records, no matter how sophisticated the algorithms are. But you can get into the cycle where you're continually trying to tune these traditional matching approaches to try to get that, eke out those extra set of gains in terms of accuracy improvements. And these can take a long time. They can cost a lot of money, and they can be a distraction from kind of the day-to-day work that organizations are trying to do to maintain data quality. Other things, just manual effort. So traditional MPIs, they automate matching to a certain degree, and then they create work queues for HIM staff or other folks to manage. And the size of the number of exceptions that end up in these queues is typically bigger than folks expect when initially implementing traditional MPI technologies. One example, one of our clients, San Diego Health Connect, had onboarded a couple major hospitals to its HIE area, and ended up with hundreds of thousands of tasks after just onboarding a couple hospitals. They looked at the idea of adding more staff, even if they'd added 4 FTEs to do this work. It would have taken them years to resolve them. So both a cost issue, but then also just a time issue. If you've got patient records that are split and you're only looking at part of the picture when you're trying to deliver a care to a patient, it doesn't do you much good if it takes you 2 years to solve that problem. So the last thing that folks do pretty frequently is recognizing that the accuracy they're seeking is not quite there. Do periodic cleanups. So there's vendors that you can bring in to do batch cleanups of your MPI and merge records. There are other organizations that can do an analysis on your systems to tell you how many duplicates you have, despite the whatever processes you have in place today. That's something that we do all the time for clients, and there's other organizations that do it. But again, it's a periodic cost that's not really addressing the fundamental problem that you're facing. And all these things add up in cost. So if you are one of these organizations that is onboarding new data to your system, and as you bring in that new data, you identify that you're not getting the accuracy you need, you go through these tuning exercises. We've seen organizations where this happens every 2 or 3 years, and it can be an expensive proposition to do this analysis and tuning work, sometimes with an external consultant. Data stewards themselves, obviously, every incremental data steward you have to add as an explicit expense to it, and then factor on top of that, sometimes you still won't get there. You have to do these periodic cleanups. So when you look at it all, the cost of running these zombie MPIs, as we're saying, it adds up to much bigger numbers than folks often think when they're just thinking about the sort of direct expenses associated with running these solutions. And that's not to mention the factors that are usually on the top of people's minds when they're thinking about the sort of total cost of their solution, which is what is the hardware cost to maintain, what is the, license maintenance costs that are baked in, and then some allocation for software upgrade processes. So this is one of the other contrasts with a sort of SaaS approach, which this applies not to MPI, just MPI, but other technology solutions that people are using, which is if you can get out of the business of having to upgrade your software to new versions and do all of that work yourself, there can be big savings there, both in terms of dollar cost to do the work, but then also kind of opportunity cost. And if you can take that off your plate as something you need to focus on as an organization, then you can redirect those resources to other things that are more productive for your business. So this chart just kind of restates the last kind of point, showing you here's the type of things that we see most organizations are aware of when they're thinking about the total cost of ownership for an MPI. Most folks are thinking about these first 4 items. And then if these next 4 are the things that often don't make it into the TCO calculation, that can be distracting and expensive. And so the idea is to think about this the whole cost of ownership, and that's where our focus is in trying to attack all of these and drive down the costs and effort associated with these latter categories too, the tuning, the stewardship, the periodic cleanups, the idea of an upgrade. If we can eliminate all of that, then you'll have a much more productive kind of MPI environment. Okay, so what can you do? You're not going to pull the plug on your MPI. It's too critical of a solution. That impacts lots of things across your enterprise. So what does this use a cloud MPI option look like? I'll just take 5 minutes here, kind of describe at a high level what our approach is, and then, like I said, hand it over to Hinata, and he can tell you some real-world, both experience with Verado, but also the sort of bigger vision of what he's doing with his organization down there in Rio Grande Valley. So the Verado solution, our universal MPI, has a few different things about it than traditional approaches. So the first is that we operate against a reference data set. So we have a data set that contains information for virtually all of the adults in the U.S. It has the demographic data that you need to identify who someone is. So the same attributes that you collect inside of your EMRs that you use to link records across those systems, we have this kind of longitudinal demographic profile of folks, and we use that to get a much higher degree of accuracy than you can get if you're just operating against the data that exists inside of your EHRs. So from this, going back to the sort of the data quality discussion from before, this is how we're approaching that problem, is knowing that the data quality inside of the EMRs themselves is limited, and it has its issues. We're trying to bring in higher quality data into the equation and use that to get a much higher accuracy result with less effort at the same time. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is this referential matching approach, which is not just taking the state-of-the-art algorithms, which we do use. We do all of the tricks that you need to do, phonetic matching and nicknames and meta distance calculations and all of those things that the industry has advanced us to in terms of traditional approaches to matching. But then we also use this idea that we have the whole population, knowledge of the whole population inside of our reference data. So when it comes to the thorny or matching issues, are these two records related to each other? Are they a husband and a wife, or is it just a typo in the name, and one is Michelle and one is Michael, and that was just a typo? Issues like siblings and twins and things like that. If you take a different approach and you actually use this knowledge of the whole universe of data of people, then there's lots of things you can do to make better decisions on those. So the idea is you can sort of exclude the possibility of certain results, and I won't go into a lot of that detail today, but it's a new way to look at it that can yield much more accurate results without that same kind of tuning cycle that you need with the traditional approach. And then the last piece is just cloud. So we offer a true SaaS offering. So you basically just you turn on and plug in and you start using the service, which is not just good from a cost perspective, but also from being able to implement quickly and get things going fast. And that was a key thing for Rio Grande. Was they had some aggressive timelines on getting their new technology stack implemented, and so being able to start very quickly was a key criteria, and we're seeing that sort of more and more with organizations that we're working with. So I mentioned this reference data. I won't go into too much detail here today, but the idea is we're taking information, again, pumpkin-headed people, from a variety of different data sources, credit header type data, utility data, like phone records and electrical utilities, those types of things, combining it with other publicly available data from government sources. And that's what we use to create this reference data set that has, again, this longitudinal demographic profile, which gives us a huge leg up when it comes to matching data. It turns out that we're not only able to sort of see through data errors, but when we encounter records that are historically sort of too thin to match, a lot of times you see records inside of EHRs that have very limited information. Maybe it's lab result data and there's only sort of names and date of birth on it or something, and all the rest of the identifying information is missing. With the traditional approach, these thin data, you just can't possibly match them. But if you have a reference data set, then there are some things you can do to get accurate results with those. And so that's sort of the approach that we're trying to take. So just a very simple example of what this idea of having reference data gives you, scenario where you have two different records from two different systems. You have Catherine Smith on Main Street with a birth date from System A, and System B, you have Kathy Johnson on Elm Road. You don't have a birth date from this system, but you have a phone number. Looking at those two records, there's nothing that would lead you to believe they're the same person. And this is obviously an extreme example, but interestingly, we do see examples like this very often. There's nothing that would lead you to believe this. This is the type of data that wouldn't even make it into the manual queue for traditional MPI approaches because they just don't look similar enough. But if you incorporate the idea of reference data, and here at the center you can see that we have on file the fact that Catherine Smith changed her name to Kathy Johnson and she moved at the same time, perhaps from Main Street to Elm Road. We have both the date of birth on file, we have the phone number on file. So with that in the middle, it sort of becomes an obvious determination that these records are held by the same person. And again, there's nothing in this example, nothing sort of too tricky that we had to do. It's just that we had the data that we needed to be able to resolve this type of issue. So that's kind of the simplified example of what the reference data idea can give you. And then there are some other principles that you can do with it as well. Okay, so so the summary is the solution that we're trying to bring. I talked about the reference data, the referential matching approach, which is great in terms of achieving higher levels of accuracy, which is really what the industry is demanding. But at the same time, we've also found that we can do that in a way that's much faster and easier to implement. It's a simpler solution. We have, we recognize the importance of security, so we're HIPAA and HITRUST certified. And then taking advantage of sort of a cloud-based approach using this reference data, we're able to provide a very scalable solution too. So when we talk with clients and we work with some bigger organizations who might be concerned, hey, I've got tens of millions of records and I'm not sure my the current infrastructure, my MPI can continue to scale with that. The SaaS solution that we're offering is already running against hundreds of millions of records just in our reference data alone. So as we onboard additional clients that have hundreds of thousands or millions or tens of millions of records, it's not there's minimal concerns with just those kind of operational characteristics that you'd have to worry about if you were trying to maintain your own technical environment. So that's the idea. With that, I think I'll hand this over to Hinata, and you can tell folks a little bit about Rio Grande and the great things you guys are doing down there. And yeah, I'll let you take over.
Hey, sounds good. Thank you there, Jay. Joaquin. So I'll go ahead and switch over here. Hope everybody can hear me. But my name is Hinata Garvin. I am the Director of Technology for the Rio Grande Valley Health Information Exchange. And we are a regional HIE along the border of South Texas with Mexico. So the deepest part of the country, actually, the most southern part. And so we service 9 counties along the border, and looking to expand eventually once we service those areas. Our main purpose is to facilitate access to the health information so that our network will have access to the patient data they need for the patient care. We've been around for a few years, 4 years, 5 years now. Texas took a regional approach to building an HIE, and so multiple HIEs within Texas were created 2012, I believe, and we are one of them that's still around, and so we're excited about that part of it. And we've recently went by and made some changes. Actually, before I go into that part, let me some of the core services at the HIE that we offer and want to offer was definitely patient health records that were accessible to all the provider teams of the patients. We wanted to also create a personal health records for the patients to have access to the data. We use the same information as well to offer chart audit services to some of the payers. We're in the process of creating a central data repository as well for more analytical reporting. We offer some secure communication between our providers as well. The biggest thing that our providers like that we are as part of our core service is alerts from when one of their patients is in the hospital. And so we give them real-time alerts when they get admitted and discharged. And we also do some disease registry reporting based on information that we gather from our clinics and the hospitals. So we, at the RGV HIE, recently we decided that the previous platform that we had was not meeting our needs for connecting an HIE or for creating an HIE. And so we decided to take a look at a modular approach to building a data exchange. And so we wanted things that would make it easy to connect a new clinic to our system, to our new platform. And we wanted to kind of take a best-in-class approach to building this. One of the things that we needed as a major part of any HIE is setting up an MPI, Master Patient Index. We got to be able to identify patients from all the organizations they could potentially be in that were part of our network. So we did a lot of research on MPIs and how we were going to identify these patients. We serve a population of about 1.6 million people or so in our 9 counties. So mostly it's 80s. I believe the population now is 83% of Hispanic. The next ones is we have a lot of winter Texans. We call winter Texans anybody who comes up from the north for the winter. And we have a lot of residents here for almost 5 months that are elderly and will stay here from Minnesota, Iowa, any of those northern states up there, and to avoid the snow. We have a high population also of travelers coming in from San Antonio and Houston. I mean, we have the best beach in Texas in South Padre Island, so that's the quick getaway for most people in Texas. One of the biggest keys that we also have is many of our patients will leave our area when they need specialty care, and so some of the more severe trauma cases would get sent over to San Antonio, and more specialized situations will also get referred out to the Houston or San Antonio area from here. So we had to keep a handle of all of those patients in the movement that they had all around outside of our region. And so we were looking at different ways that we were going to actually implement an MPI. We needed something that could fit with what we had decided to be our HIE platform, which, by the way, is ForCare, which is an XDS-based document repository. And so we needed a way to quickly integrate whatever MPI we were going to use with this platform that we decided on. Also, we literally stopped everything we were doing and started from scratch, which means we couldn't have any downtime, or at least very minimal downtime. So we needed a solution, the complete solution, building the whole HIE from scratch that was not going to keep us down for the whole year. And so we wanted something that was going to get us done in a very aggressive timeline, which was 4 months. We started in January, and I wanted to be up and running by May 1st. We needed something to easily integrate with our system because any development time that was going to be required for either side was definitely going to delay our aggressive timeline. And we also needed to make sure that our patients matched. We didn't want to traditional MPIs, as Joaquin was mentioning earlier, you've got to manage your population and then go back in there and make adjustments to that population as your population grows in your MPI. Well, we didn't have that. We were starting from scratch, so we weren't going to have that luxury of previous data, previous patients. So we were going to go over there to try and get this data, all these patients identified. We don't have historical data to do it. So that was a big part of what we were looking for in a solution for us. So we decided that we needed to go back in there and take a close look at how Verado would work with our system that we wanted to implement ForCare. And so one of the biggest things that we had, so we started, like I said, in January, and our timeline was to go live by May 1st. And so this was going to require the work from both of our partners to, we were going to get, we are getting ADTs, patient demographics. Sometimes I don't even get ADTs, but they are still patient demographics from, we went live with 11 organizations with 11 different EMRs and on May 1st. And so we had to take a look at all the ADTs coming in, or some of them didn't even send us that, like I mentioned earlier, that we just had a CCDA coming in, and so we had to go after the ADTs so that we can get that funneled in to Verado. And so we send our data into ForCare. ForCare decides if it's a new patient and doesn't have the EMR number from that domain, that organization hasn't been created in Verado, then it'll go, in ForCare, then it'll go over and ping Verado and say, hey, I need a universal patient ID for this patient. Who is he? So then we'll match it, and he says, hey, this is a universal patient ID for this patient now. Now, ForCare says, hey, I already have this universal patient ID listed or created from another organization. So then the link gets created between the two EMR patient IDs. And so in the back end of everything, I've got a universal patient ID, but everybody can still access this patient linked to all the other data from the EMR patient ID. Very efficient, very smooth for us. It took us, like I said, with all the other things that we had to do in place, even getting the care side of things up and running, it took us 4 months to make all of this work with the process and the testing from all the organizations that we needed. Well, what we got out of it, though, was pretty great, pretty amazing what we ended up with. We went live, like I said, in May 1st, and we've added quite a few organizations since then. But the biggest thing that I would go back and say, reasons why we actually chose and went this route was on the cost side of things. As we were researching these MPIs, started looking at all the manpower it was going to take, not only to implement, to build some of these logics, even for there's down here in our area, there are a lot of people who have very similar names, and it just makes it tough to build that. Jose Garcia there's thousands of them, and so we needed to make sure that we could account for something like that. Fortunately for me, there's not that many Hinata Garvins, but Jose Garcias, there's tons of them. And so we needed to have that, and we knew that we were going to need our MPI solution to account for that without minimal input from us. That was the biggest key. So we, at the RGV HIE, we have 6 employees. And so there's 2 of us on the IT side of things and the technical side of things, and 4 for helping with project management and leadership and clinical analysts. So between 2 of us, we wanted to make sure that whatever solution we had, we could handle it. And as we started investigating these MPIs, the cost of ownership was going to be huge for us. As you go back and look at the slide here that we kind of looked at and put together, this is a 4-year cost savings that we put together. We figured we saved at least, and this is where we could account for directly, over 4 years, $234,000. The reason being is we knew that we were going to have to account for quarterly or even biannual adjustments to the MPI. We were going to have to get somebody to come in and help us and pay them contract hours to do that for us. We also knew that with an MPI, we were going to need to get somebody to come in and actually manage that full time. And so we were going to have to get one person that was going to be their job. And we didn't want to get to that situation. We couldn't. We just, it's more manpower for us that we're a nonprofit and we need to account for everything like that. So we decided that we needed to find a solution that wouldn't require us to do it. And then the implementation time was going to be bigger than what we needed. Nobody could can't come up to me and tell me and guarantee me that they could get up in 4 months. Everybody said it was going to take much longer, almost maybe 6 to 8 weeks, 8 months, because we needed to get trained on how we were going to set these up. But that wasn't going to work for us. And so that's how we ended up with Verado and using them as part of our HIE solution. And so we get monthly reports from them on matches, and we use those we also get potential duplicates. So one of the nice things that came out of implementing Verado is we have a couple of big hospital systems that are part of our HIE. And so they were sending us duplicate patients that we knew were the same patient, but were coming in with 2 different patient IDs from the same system. They were doubled up there. So we needed to go back and make sure, and we went back to these organizations and said, hey, here's a list of patients that we think you have 2 records of in your system. And once they went back and reviewed it, they were able to go back and say, yes, that's exactly what's going on. This patient's listed in twice. And so now we're working with them to come back and send us an ADT update merge so that they can let us know which of the patient's IDs they actually want to be the active one, but still link the others to this this universal patient ID from Verado gave us. A huge benefit to our hospitals is helps maintain all of their patients that way, so that they're not adding multiple information there or multiple records for the same patient. And so what we've ended up doing over in the next since May 1st, so we're in November 1st now, with the solution we put together, we were able to not only include clinics and hospitals, but we also have ambulance EMS providers connected to the HIE. So we're able to identify those patients that they give us demographic information for almost on the fly so that they can actually access the patient's records from the point of care during an emergency if there's a match. And that's because the EPCR systems that EMS use down didn't use HL7 to send data to us for the most part. So we had to help figure out the solution to do that. And we were able to identify patients and high utilizers of the ambulance services to the hospitals. So this also, the MPI has also allowed us to not just the EMS organizations, but we're looking into adding pharmacies and adding them to the HIE so that they could access the patient records after we've identified them. And then we're looking as well into adding home health and nursing homes, assisted living areas for ADT alerts from the hospitals, right? The biggest thing that for our alert system to work, which was outside of full care, it was going to be that we needed to make sure and identify the patients that match any of the clinics registered to any of our clinics. And so that's a big part. We didn't want to send a primary care physician and notice that one of their patients that really wasn't that badly matched was in the hospital. So that was a big part for us to be able to do as well. And so, like I said, all of this was done with surprisingly ease. I've done a lot of projects without outside of the HIE portion of it. There's always problems you run into when you address them. But this was surprisingly the solution that we came up with was probably one of the easier ones that we had because once the integration was started, we basically paying Verado for hey, this is who we think it is. You tell me who you think it is, and we've got a patient match all the way through. So that's how we use the Verado with our HIE portal at the HIE. Currently, we're up to over 100,000 patient lives, unique patient lives, from about almost 30 organizations now. By the end of the year, we're going to add actually quite a few. We're looking to be closer to about 150,000 lives and adding a couple of big hospitals. And this was kind of a controlled growth for us right now since it's our first year. But everything's in place now for us on our second year, next year, starting January 1st. We're hoping to add about 50 or so organizations and get up to about 300,000 lives next year. And because the ease of the integrations that we had between the two and the fact that we don't need to manage every day an MPI, definitely is going to allow us to do that aggressive growth that we're hoping for. And I believe that's all I had today.
All right. Thanks, Hinata. That's great. It's great hearing you tell your story. A lot of times we do these webinars, and it's big. The biggest health systems or large payers that are telling the story, your story is just very different with the sort of limited resources you have, but still the really innovative things that you guys are doing down there. The EMS thing is something that very few other HIEs certainly are doing. The collaboration you guys have with your participants, hospitals and clinics is really good. So I appreciate you coming on and giving your perspective and telling your story there. To wrap that up, when we first started talking to you, Hinata, was you kind of gave us the trifecta of difficult requirements. You had limited resources. You had this a whole new technical environment you're trying to implement with the constraints on not even having the data available to do kind of configuration testing, and then this incredibly aggressive timeline, the 4 months. So it's been an exciting last year getting up and going with you guys. So thanks for sharing that. And it's impressive what you guys have done, though. So folks on the call, especially in the HIE space, if you're looking for knowledge sharing, I'm sure Hinata would be a great person to talk to with all they've accomplished there. So we've got we just have a couple minutes left. One thing I did want to share actually with you, the metrics that Hinata reported there on total cost of ownership. We worked with Hinata and team, and then we've worked with some other clients that we have to build out a calculator for this TCO savings idea. So we're often talking with folks and talking about the idea of using a SaaS-based MPI, specifically our SaaS-based MPI, who are trying to build a business case and say, okay, if I did do this, what would the savings be? And basically those same types of metrics that Hinata presented for his organization, which the overall numbers there are outside of the context of how many patients are being managed and how big Hinata's organization are. The overall numbers there are modest, but as Hinata said, they were big for RGV in terms of savings on hiring additional people and so forth. So anyway, so we built out a calculator. It's on our website. You can go use it. You can put in your own parameters. So what's the size of your patient population? What is how many staff do you currently have that are resolving duplicate issues, tasks, things like that? And if you were to implement, how long would it take for a traditional approach versus the kind of the plug-in approach? So something you can go take a look at and play with, and then we're happy to provide more information on that as well. So Jim, I know we kind of used up most of our time, but are there a couple questions that we might take before we wrap up today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joaquin, and thanks, Hinata. We do have actually a lot of questions we're not going to get to today, but we will follow up with you offline. And again, you'll be getting a link to the recording. You can download the slides today. And if you have any other questions, I'm sure the folks online here will be happy to address them directly with you. So appreciate everybody's attendance and patience today. So just to clarify here, Joaquin, you sort of mentioned you could interface with existing MPIs, but is it typically sort of a rip and replace kind of thing that with Verado, or how do people deal with Verado when they already have an MPI?
That's a great question. I think I mentioned earlier on that I was going to tee up and come back to that, and I didn't do that. So thanks for the cue there. Yeah, so we've been talking about our full MPI solution, which is what and our own team implemented there at RGV. But it's not the only way to leverage our technology. So the concept of referential matching, using our reference data to improve your overall accuracy, can be deployed alongside an existing MPI. So some of our clients, some of the ones I think I had on the intro slide, Healthix is the New York Manhattan HIE, who the largest HIE in the country, and they have a very they have a robust MPI that they've had running for a long time. It's wired into lots of things. It's doing a good job. But they had literally millions of tasks being created because of their patient volume, and it's just not practical to deploy human resources against that. So in that type of scenario, we have a specific mode of operation called AutoSteward that basically sits alongside an existing MPI, such as that. And essentially just automates the resolution of what would be the manual work involved. Right. So I know we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but that idea of being able to deploy the technology alongside an existing MPI is definitely something that we do, right, in addition to the full solution.
Okay. And Hinata, you guys sort of got the idea. You guys kind of started over, but did you actually sunset an MPI, or how did that work for you in terms of using Verado and ForeCare?
Yeah, our previous platform had a MPI already built in, which really wasn't as accurate as we wanted. So when we replaced that, we needed to do everything from scratch.
Okay, so you really did. So you sort of started from ground zero then, basically, right?
Yes, ground zero. When we turned the switch on for live, we started with 0 patients and started from that day forward.
Okay, wow, that's something. Hey, both you gentlemen, I do a lot of work with master data management, and as well as things like patient indexes. And a lot of the talk over there is about governance and how this stuff gets managed. That's really the bulk of the conversation. And with a reference database, I can definitely see the utility and ease of managing. But real quickly, Joaquin, who owns this data and who stewards it with Verado?
Yeah, and I did peek at the questions coming in. I saw a number of questions around the reference data concept that I introduced. So we acquire this data. Verado acquires it from a number of different sources. So this data that we use as part of our reference platform is owned by Verado. The only thing we use it for is identification. We don't sell the data to anyone. You can't get the data for any other purpose. It's solely acquired for this purpose of establishing, accurate patient identity. So we own the reference data. When clients deploy our universal MPI solution, they basically get their own private tenant that has their own data. They own their own data exclusively. We don't have any rights to use that data for anything. So it's a very sort of clean setup, and our clients get the best of both worlds. They have full ownership of their own data, but they get access to this curated data asset that we manage, with our own internal processes.
Gotcha. So they have a single tenant relationship with you, and that
each individual client does.
Okay, great. All right, well, we have lots of questions we're not going to get to, but we promise to get you out on time. So I'm going to wrap things up, and we will follow up with you, and you're welcome to ask any questions directly to the folks at Verado. I want to thank our speakers today for this session on why MPIs are dead and what killed them. Joaquin Neto, with the Vice President of Healthcare at Verado. Hinata Garvin, Director of Technology at Rio Grande Valley HIE, down there in Texas. Thanks to your audience out there for Health Data Management. I'm Jim Erickson. Thank you all for coming out today, and I hope everybody has a great week. So long, everybody.